We've got Lucy Worsley here to talk about her brilliant book, Agatha Christie, A Very Elusive Woman. The bit I found very interesting was, lots of stuff, but the bit that sticks with me, because I read this book a few months ago, was that she was, she very nearly didn't get published at all. So she was sending her books off to publishers and getting turned down, and she was, always nearly becoming a mother and a housewife or a wife, and the writing nearly took a back seat. But she did get sort of picked up by this slightly scurrilous publisher called John Lane, who ripped her off. But what's interesting to me is if he hadn't agreed to publish her, as much as she had trouble with him and had to get out of the contract she made with him, if he hadn't published her, then she might very well never have been known at all, because nobody else was publishing her.
Well, yes, and I think that happened because she was a bit ahead of her time. It was extraordinary that she'd written a book in the first place, when you consider that when she was born in 1890, she was born into a wealthy family, big house, servants, but then there was no expectation at all that a girl like her would ever work. It was her destiny to get married and to have children. So work was kind of a dirty word for nice young ladies like that. But then the family lost all of its money, and World War One came along, and because of that, she went out into the public sphere, if you like, and she became a nurse helping out, and she began to think, okay, maybe I would get satisfaction by doing some actual work and getting paid for it. So she went out to the marketplace with her book, and it was only after the war. Right. She's really a writer of the 1920s. And it was when the war was over and some women had got the vote and some women had worked during the war and some women were doing extraordinary things like not get married, that the world began to be ready for a female writer. And when she took her book to the publisher, she said, okay, I'll choose a man's name. Right. That's what women have to do. And the publisher was a canny guy. And he said, no, it's actually the time for women to step forward. And I think that's because one way of looking at this is that the men had just basically massively messed up. There had been this 4 terrible, brutal years of fighting. It was time to let the other gender sort of have a go. And you can also see, this was sort of brilliant and awful for Agatha Christie at the same time. You can see that the publishing industry in the 1920s, particularly newspapers and magazines, which is where a lot of her work first appeared, not between the covers of a novel, it was serialized. It was looking for female writers because the press at the time was wanting to shift its model from a newspaper being something that a man bought once a week to something that men and women bought every day. Right. So we're talking about new papers like The Sketch taking over the marketplace. And what these new papers wanted were articles by and about successful prominent women, which Agatha Christie was able to be rather fabulously at first, but then, and I'm sure we're going to come on to this, Richard, then it all went horribly wrong for her.
I'm sure we are.